To your point, former Trump Organization CFO Allen Weisselberg now has pleaded guilty to a number of criminal charges tied to his indictment in a sweeping tax fraud case. In court yesterday, Weisselberg admitted to collecting more than $1.7 million in off-the-books compensation, including free rent, school tuition, and multiple Mercedes automobiles. He agreed to pay nearly $2 million in taxes and fines and serve 5 months in jail. As part of his plea deal, Weisselberg is expected to testify at the Trump Organization's upcoming trial this fall. He is not expected to implicate his former boss, though. Donald Trump himself is not charged with any wrongdoing, but prosecutors have noted he did sign some of the checks at the center of yesterday's case. So, George Conway, help our viewers make sense of the significance of this. First of all, we should point out that Allen Weisselberg's relationship with Donald Trump well predates Donald Trump's career in politics. He's been his right-hand man for decades now.
40 years.
What's the significance of that case yesterday?
Well, I mean, the overall point I'd make about what's happening in New York is that the criminal case is less now important than the civil case. And we've known that since the resignation of the two lead prosecutors who were handling the case, Mark Pomerantz and Carrie Dunn. They resigned after the new district attorney took over because I think that DA, I'm reading between the lines, decided that he didn't want to go forward with a big case against the Trump Organization and Donald Trump for tax fraud, insurance fraud, and bank fraud without flipping Weisselberg. And they didn't flip Weisselberg, at least on that stuff. They flipped him only on the small stuff that they've indicted him and the Trump Organization on. And that's still significant. He's going to, the trial in the fall will be embarrassing to the Trump Organization. And Trump, is sort of to some extent is the Trump Organization, but it's not going to put him in jail. That said, there is the continued civil investigation being conducted by the Attorney General of the state of New York. And remember, it's easy to forget after everything that's happened last week that I think it was last Wednesday, Donald John Trump pled the Fifth Amendment 440 times in a civil deposition in that civil investigation. And you can use pleading, and he's not the only member of his family and a member of the Trump Organization who has pled the Fifth. You can use all of that in a civil case to infer bad facts and infer basically a liability or guilt in the civil case. And under the Martin Act, which is this broad anti-fraud statute that New York has, that's the basis, could be the basis for charges against the Trump Organization for fraud, insurance fraud, bank fraud, tax fraud, what have you. He could get, the Trump Organization could get hammered. I mean, they've already lost their accountants months ago, and I viewed that as kind of the beginning of the end of the Trump Organization. You need financial statements to borrow money, and he's got all hundreds of millions of dollars he needs to refinance. I mean, he's in deep trouble still, even if he doesn't have criminal exposure in the state of New York.
So, Dave Ehrenberg, I'd asked why somebody with 15 or so felonies got such a light sentence, and it seems that a lot of tax experts believe that these charges are pretty thin gruel. And it's a great example of when people started talking about the Trump Organization. Oh, the criminal charges, and oh, they're going to get Weisselberg, and oh, it's going to be so bad he's going to turn on Trump. And then here we are at the end, and it's, they didn't pay income tax on like car rentals or but I don't mean to undermine it. He broke the law. There's no doubt about it. But here's another great example of the media saying, oh, it's just going to melt down the entire Trump Organization and he's going to go to prison for life and he's going to have to testify against Donald Trump. It just doesn't turn out that way. Didn't turn out that way in this case.
Joe, I got to admit, I bought into it, too. I thought Donald Trump was going to be indicted in New York. And I think had Cyrus Vance Jr. continued to serve as district attorney in Manhattan, he probably would have. After all, this was his legacy issue. He chased Donald Trump to the Supreme Court twice to get his taxes. But then he retired and Alvin Bragg took over and just did not feel there was enough evidence to pursue the case. And it's his name on the bottom line. So I get it. But I thought the case against Weisselberg was actually kind of strong. Remember, they had two separate sets of books. It's like the movie The Producers. One book said, show to the IRS. The other one is, don't show to the IRS.
Okay, so that's pretty. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, but in the end, this plea deal does embolden Tish James's civil case, as George said, against the Trump Organization, because now Weisselberg can testify without any Fifth Amendment protection because the criminal case is over. So he will be her star witness. And if you think that a civil case doesn't matter, just ask Ivanka and the Trump Foundation, which is no more because of a civil action filed by Attorney General Tish James.
Yeah. So, Donnie Deutsch, I'm sure you hear this an awful lot. I hear it an awful lot. Donald Trump always gets away with it. He is the Rollo Tomassi of American politics. He is the guy that always gets away with it. And in America, no man is above the law except Donald Trump. Just curious, are you still hearing that from people? Do you personally believe that Donald Trump's ever going to see justice for well, hell, I mean, why don't we just start on January the 6th for being at the center of a fascist riot to overthrow legal election results?
Look, I probably get that question asked more than anything, and people are usually asking with their hands up. They're never going to get this guy. How does he get away with it? Why is he the only one that gets away with it? There's a wear out fact that there's so much of it that each drop in the bucket has less significance. I do believe that in the end, January 6th will be his undoing. They were never going to take down this president on, unfortunately, as any other citizen would be taken down on an insurance fraud situation or a bank fraud situation. I do think that as the January 6th investigation goes deeper and deeper and deeper, I think somehow in that bucket will finally be the tipping point. Today it hasn't happened. No, there's just something that is just incredulous that one after the other. But I do think that somehow, I believe this, maybe I'm just an optimistic idiot who looks like Elliot Gould with glasses on, but I do believe at some point, something in January 6th comes forward and will somewhere tied up in there, they will finally get this guy.
So can I ask you one final question, Donnie? Yeah. Is it true? Do all the safes connect in a tunnel underneath?